Hello everyone, welcome back to my dining room. It's time for draft boot camp. I know it's been a while, I have missed you, hopefully you have all missed me. We've got some cool stuff to talk about today, so with that in mind, we're just going to get right started and hopefully get you guys some cool stuff. Today we're going to be talking about some underrated cards for M19 draft. Now, there's been quite a bit of debate, I guess, not debate, but there's been quite a lot of content that's been done about strategies. I really wanted to focus on cards that I think aren't getting nearly as much attention as they should be. And so that's what we're going to start talking about today. So these cards aren't necessarily going to win you games automatically, but they might be role players in the decks that you're building, and they might actually help you to do a little bit better. So with that in mind, we're going to jump right into the first card that I think people are underrating, and that's Trustee Pack Beast. Now, I know Trustee Pack Beast seems like an odd pick. It's simply a 3-mana 2/3, which if you've watched our section on the vanilla test is okay. Usually you want to be paying 3 mana for a 3/3, but 3 mana for a 2/3 isn't terrible either. It blocks and attacks a little more profitably because it can trade against those 2/2s for 2 mana, so that's decent. But there's quite a few artifacts in this set that die. I'm talking about stuff like Meteor Golem. I'm talking about stuff like Gargoyle Sentinel. The Apparatus, the explosive Apparatus, that when you can sack it to do 2 damage. I'm doing the potion throwing motion. Potion throwing motion. I'm a poet and I didn't even know it. But you do this, you tap 3 and you sacrifice the Apparatus to dome someone in the face, and then you can bring it back with your Trustee Pack Beast for value. That's very good as well. I also am a big fan of Marauders Axe in this format, and so if your opponent manages to destroy your equipment, either with something like Reclamation Sage or Goblin Trash Master. I almost said Goblin Taskmaster. Trash Master is a hard thing to say. But Trustee Pack Beast is good for all of those things. It can bring back those artifact creatures, bring back your explosive apparatuses? We'll work on it. We'll workshop it. But it can bring those back, and I think that's pretty spectacular. So I actually have really been enjoying Trustee Pack Beast in decks where I feel like I'm going to lose my artifacts or my artifact creatures quite a bit. So I like that one a little bit more than I think some people do. The next one on the list is one that I just mentioned, actually, for Trustee Pack Beast, and that's Marauders Axe. There are a lot of token-producing cards in this format, stuff like Gallant Knight, stuff like Goblin Taskmaster. It is Goblin Task. There's a Instigator, sorry. Trash Master and Instigator. Just gets me all kinds of mixed up. But Goblin Instigator makes a 1/1 Goblin token. Gallant Knight makes a 2/2 Knight token. Heroic Reinforcements gives you some soldier tokens to work with. All of these things become a lot better when you when you give them a nice big axe. Lets them sort of trade up or gain value. Essentially, you're getting a little bit more bang for your buck with those cards. Also in this set, something that's been happening more and more is we've realized that flying creatures are very, very important to how well you do in a draft. And being able to make your flying creature hit a little bit harder is huge. There's nothing quite like putting a Marauder's Axe on your Sky Scanner, and all of a sudden your little 1/1 that could is now a 3/1 that threatens to get in a lot of damage to your opponent unless they deal with it effectively. I like Marauder's Axe a lot. Overpriced Bone Splitter is still pretty good, and it's still pretty decent in this set. I think people are actually undervaluing this card a little more than they should. So if you see this and you realize, I've got some real cheap creatures that I think could trade up a little better if they were well armed with an axe, or if you have ways to make tokens, or if you have a lot of little cheap flyers, all of that stuff is really useful with the Marauder's Axe. Also, good to note, the Departed Deckhand only dies when it's targeted by spells, not by abilities, which is usually how those illusion-based creatures go. So you can actually give Marauder's Axe to your Departed Deckhand and have a 4/2 that's basically unblockable in this set. It's also really good with Boggart Brutes. Because of the Menace, being able to make a 5/2 with Menace is just a huge deal for your opponent. So again, there's a lot of stuff that the Marauder's Axe synergizes with, and I think it's really important to be on the lookout for pieces like Marauder's Axe if you have creatures that can take advantage of that bump in power. Moving forward to our next card, I want to talk a little bit about Vampire Neonate. This is a card that I've heard Ben Stark talk about quite a bit because he loves it, and after playing with it a couple times, I am a believer. This card is sweet. So it hits the ground on turn 1 as an effective blocker, and then basically it allows you to turn all of your excess mana on your opponent's end steps into like little tiny incidental life swings. And while that might not matter a whole lot, over the course of a game, it's not uncommon for a Neonate to be able to gain you 5 life and force your opponent to lose 5 life. And that's a pretty big deal for one card. Basically, so if you imagine that if they printed a 1 mana 0/3 that says your opponent loses 5 life and you gain 5 life. Now, obviously, it doesn't exactly say that, and you're going to need to put yourself into a position where you can use that ability often. But again, having a 0/3 blocker for 1 mana on turn 1 that can slowly sort of give you something to do with that excess mana that you have is huge, especially because in this format, Flood is such a big deal. In Dominaria, Flood was not such a big deal. Like, drawing way too many lands was not such a big deal because you had stuff like Kicker, which would give you value if you just drew a single Kicker spell, so you could use all that excess land to do something really impressive. Or stuff like the Sagas, which gave you value over several turns. But those aren't here in this format, so having something that you can dump excess mana into every turn that also blocks effectively is huge. And that's not even to say anything... That's to say nothing, of course, about the myriad of different cards that trigger with life gain. I'm talking about stuff like a Johnny's Pridemate. That gets a little bit bigger. There's also the vampires that ping your opponent whenever you gain life, and there's the vampire that makes bats whenever you gain life. So even overlooking those synergies, even if you're not in one of those decks where like the life gain matters, having a cheap, efficient blocker that lets you do something extra for your mana, with your mana, I should say, is huge. I've used this card in a blue-black control deck multiple times because it hits the ground early, it blocks consistently, and when I'm playing 17, 18 lands, I have something to do on those turns where it's like, crap, I have 5 mana, all I'm doing is making dropping a 2 or a 3 drop, or leaving up 2 or 3 mana for a counterspell. Having Neonate be able to give me that life and hurt my opponent a little bit is huge. I definitely don't think you should sleep on this card. People are starting, I think, to understand that this card is far more effective than it lets on, but I definitely think you should be paying close attention to Vampire Neonate. I like the card quite a bit, and I've been impressed in most of my black controlling decks when I've had at least 1 or 2 copies of this card. And last but certainly not least, I want to talk about big creatures. I think big creatures in this format are really, really good. M19 is a pretty decent removal package, but with that in mind, it's not nearly as good as Dominaria's, and because there's so fewer, I should say, sources of card advantage, a big creature can do a lot of work in M19. The big creature that I think is doing the best right now is Colossal Dreadmaw. 6 mana for a 6/6 Trampler was not very good in Ixalan because that format was defined almost exclusively by the aggressive, low-cost creatures. And a 6 mana 6/6 was not very good in Dominaria because there were so many sources of card advantage, and the removal suite was just so good. But in this set, the removal's not nearly as good, it's not nearly as aggressive as Ixalan, and there are going to be some times where you just want to get it done with a 6/6 with Trample. And I have to say, Colossal Dreadmaw, every time it's come out, has been a card that my opponents have either had to deal with or die. And it's kind of a big game for a random common dinosaur that last saw printing in a set defined by 2-drops. But here it is now, the same cost. But context is everything, and I think Colossal Dreadmaw can actually win you some games out of nowhere if your opponents are unprepared to deal with it. Seriously, there's not a whole lot else to say other than sometimes you just need to put a big slab of beef on the board and turn it sideways, and it does really, really well. So that's it, folks. 4 cards that I think are super underrated right now in M19 Draft. If you have enjoyed this video, or if you find any of the Draft Bootcamp stuff helpful, please consider giving us a like, a share, a comment, a subscribe. All of those things help us. Hit the little bell thingy. I like that I'm doing a lot of hand motions for this. Maybe we make the Apparatus hand motion the bell hand motion from now on, but we'll see. But until next time, I have been Kyle. You guys have been fantastic. Thank you so much, and I'll see you soon. Peace.